Welcome to screencast number 9, by the way. So here's where the argument comes in that people have in agreeing or disagreeing with global climate change. And the question is, are we responsible for climate change? And scientists agree that increased greenhouse gases are causing global warming, and that this increase is coming from the burning of fossil fuels. In 2005, the National Academies of Science from 11 nations issued a joint statement urging political leaders to take action because of the evidence that they were gathering. There is a broad and clear scientific consensus that climate change is a pressing issue, but many people deny that it's happening. Some people will admit that climate change is happening, but they doubt the cause, and they doubt that humans can impact the climate and cause a change. Conservative think tanks and industry-sponsored scientists aimed to cast doubt on the scientific consensus are in place. They try to bring in other factors. Of course, media tries to present a face that global climate change isn't happening. I know in your book it says it tries to present two sides to the issue, but media tends to move people away from believing that they could be a cause. But the sides and the arguments are not equally supported by the evidence, and you have to go where the evidence is. Most Americans accept that fossil fuel consumption is changing the planet. When Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth came out in 2007, the IPCC reported on the internet that it raised public awareness. Despite its popularity, when I say that, it wasn't really popular, people really laughed at it and laughed at his idea of global warming, and then he later changed it to global climate change. So I think the person presenting the Inconvenient Truth was more attacked than the idea. It was covered widely by the media, which brought awareness, and the people involved were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for presenting it. In 2009, a hacker illegally broke into a university's computer in the United Kingdom and made public several thousands of documents, including over 1,000 private emails among a handful of climate scientists. And the messages appear to show questionable behavior in the use of data and the treatment of other researchers. Climate change deniers named the incident ClimateGate and used it to accuse the entire scientific establishment of wrongdoing and conspiracy, and the news media disseminated the story wisely. However, subsequent investigations into the affair by 6 different independent panels all cleared climate scientists, concluding that there was no evidence of wrongdoing. Each panel concluded that some individuals may have exercised poor taste or judgment and that some practices could be improved, but they also found that many media accounts trumpeting the news had been misrepresented and misrepresented the content of the emails. And the panels agreed that the hacked messages among the few individuals in no way called into question the vast array of research results that were compiled by the thousands of hardworking independent climate scientists over several decades. I'm going to pause here for a moment. I'll be right back. Okay. So, our response to climate change. I think most people accept that our fossil fuel consumption is altering the planet. Most. There are a couple of different responses that we could have to the way that we prevent climate change. There's 2 actually fundamental ways that these actions would reduce greenhouse gas emissions and they would lessen the severity of climate change. And the first way is through mitigation. And the aim to mitigate or alleviate the problem means that we would improve energy efficiency, we would switch to clean and renewable energy sources, or we would prevent deforestation, we would recover landfill gas, and we would encourage farm practices that protect soil quality. Okay, so that's the first avenue that we can take. The second avenue is to pursue strategies that cushion ourselves from the impacts of climate change, and that would be adaptation, because the goal is to adapt to the change. So in Maldives, where they erected the seawall, that would be an example, or the Tuvalus that leave their island to make a new life. Other examples could be restricting coastal development, adjusting farming practices to cope with drought, to modify management practices to deal with reduced water flows. We would also need to watch out for glacial outburst floods and salt contamination of our groundwater. When we look at these, both are necessary. We can't just do one. We can't just mitigate, and we just can't adapt. We need to do both. We need adaptation because even if we could halt our emissions right now, greenhouse gases and pollution already are going to exist and need to be taken care of, need to be adjusted to. We're seeing global warming in the planet systems, and what will happen is it'll reach a new equilibrium with temperature rising an estimated 1 degree Fahrenheit more by the end of the century. We need to pursue mitigation because if we do nothing to diminish climate change, it will eventually overwhelm any efforts we might make to adapt. We need to be able to leave a sustainable future for our civilization, and we need to safeguard the living planet that we know. So what's going to happen is the rest of this chapter is going to be dedicated to mitigation. The sooner we begin reducing our emissions and we lower the level at which they will peak, we will have a better effect on the climate. Let's take a look at this graphic. So we're seeing global surface warming, and here it was in the 20th century. And then we branch off. This is one direction it could take, another direction it could take. Okay, and so these are various directions that could happen. So let's take a look at this. If we limit our yearly carbon emissions, the red line would show where we would go. And the blue and the green and the yellow lines show the change expected under scenarios of rapid, medium, and slow control of the emissions. So actually rapid, medium, and slow control of the emissions. The vertical bars show means and ranges by the year 21,000 and temperatures for each scenario. And these predictions are based on a large number of climate models put together. So, as I said, we're looking at mitigation, and we are developing solutions in electricity generation. The U.S. is the largest source of emissions by 40% because of the amount of electricity that we use. 70% of the electricity comes from our fossil fuels. Coal causes most of these emissions. So if we reduce fossil fuel use, we can encourage conservation and efficiency, and we can switch to cleaner and renewable energy sources, solar energy, wind energy, water energy, as examples of what we could use. We can make lifestyle choices to reduce electricity use. The APA's Energy Star program already rates appliances and lights and windows. You did inventory of your house, and pull out those papers and take a look at them. We would have discussed them here with this, but look at what types of appliances that you have and the regulations are on the appliances. So the idea is to replace old appliances for more efficient ones, to use the compact fluorescent lights that reduce our energy for lighting by 40%. Make sure you have efficient windows that don't leak in cold air during the winter time, which would make your thermostat run, that your ducts are clean, and that your house is insulated, and that your heating and cooling systems are current, that can reduce energy uses and emissions by 30%. Manufacturers can make the same types of energy saving decisions within their warehouses and industry. Plus, manufacturers can also make more energy efficient products, helping with the economy. We need to switch to clean energy sources. We need to get away from coal, and we need to cut natural gas emissions by about 50%. We need alternatives to fossil fuel for our cars, and we're doing battery-powered cars. We're looking at hydro-fueled cars, looking at nuclear power and bioenergy, solar, wind, hydroelectric. All of those are efficient and reduce the amount of fossil fuel use. We need to look at carbon sequestration. How can we store this excess carbon? We've got to be able to capture it, and that means excuse me, I had a little tickle there. We need carbon capture technologies, and these are ways that can remove carbon dioxide from emissions. Cars have catalytic converters that help to capture some of this and change it over, which has helped. Carbon sequestration, which I've mentioned many times. Sequestration is storage. This is going to be a big up-and-coming phrase that you're going to hear more and more, and this is how can we store carbon underground where it will not seep out. There's different ideas that people have had. Poplar trees are one of the best trees in storing carbon, so the idea was to plant more poplar trees. Great, but what do you do with the poplar trees? When you cut them down, can you store them in the Arctic? That was one of the ideas, storing them in the Arctic where it's cold so that they won't decompose and release the carbon dioxide. Or are you going to use them, and can they be used in building materials and making paper and products like that? So that's some of the things that we have to look in. We need to use depleted oil and gas deposits and salt mines. We may not be able to store enough carbon dioxide really to make a difference. Our ocean is storing it. Our trees convert it into sugar. But just like we talked about, once you get that glass full, everything's going to overflow. It's not going to be able to store it. So we have to look at ways of carbon sequestration. How can we store that carbon? Transportation. This is the largest source for the U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions. The U.S. On average, family makes about 10 car trips each day. So we need to be able to cut that back. Typical cars are inefficient. About 85% of the fuel is actually wasted. And more efficient gas-powered cars can be built, but again, the oil industry has their hand in restricting this building. It can be done. We have the technology, but our people in the oil industry, they want their money, they want their profits, so they buy a lot of politicians that won't vote for these. We've got hybrid cars, we've got electric, there's alternative fuel, there's hydrogen fuel that they've been working on. These are much more efficient and produce fewer emissions.